So today, we're going to dive into what might just be the single biggest change in all of human history. It's a moment that completely altered how we live, how we eat, how we organize ourselves. And it all boils down to one revolutionary idea. Just take a look at these two images. On the left, you've got a scene that was basically humanity's reality for almost 2 million years. And on the right, a full-blown, complex city. In the grand scheme of things, it feels like we went from one to the other almost overnight. So the big question is, what gives? What happened? All right, so to really get a grip on this revolution, we've got to go back. We need to see what the world was like before it all went down. And this was life for the vast majority of our time on this planet. I mean, the scale of time here is just mind-blowing. We're talking millions of years where humans were hunter-gatherers. And don't get me wrong, they weren't primitive or anything. These folks invented tools, they mastered fire, they developed language, they even made some seriously incredible art. But here's the catch. There was one huge limitation to this whole lifestyle. No matter how clever or advanced they got, they were always on the move. They had to follow the animals, follow the seasons. And that constant travel meant they just couldn't build up those big, permanent, complex societies we see later on. Yeah, and that's the word for it, right? Nomads. Early humans who moved from place to place. Their entire lives were basically organized around finding their next meal. And that's the key takeaway here. That nomadic lifestyle is what prevented the kind of world we live in from ever getting started. And then, boom, everything changed. This is the tipping point in our story, the moment that unlocks a totally new future for all of us. Just try to wrap your head around that. After 2 million years of doing things pretty much the same way, a new idea starts to spread. And this idea, it was so powerful, it was going to completely rewrite the rules for humanity. And what was that idea? Agriculture. Yep, farming. Around 8000 BC, people figured out how to plant crops and tame animals. Now, this wasn't just, a new way to get dinner. This was a complete change in our relationship with the earth. We went from finding our food to actually making our food. Okay, so this one thing, farming, it kicked off a massive chain reaction. It was like a cascade of consequences that would literally build the world we know today. Let's walk through how that happened. It's a really simple, logical domino effect when you think about it. Step 1, you figure out farming. That lets you create a food surplus, way more food than you need to eat right now. Well, that extra food can support more people, which leads to a population boom. And, hey, if you don't have to wander around looking for food anymore, you can build a permanent village and stay put. And wow, this graph just says it all. Look at that. For thousands upon thousands of years, the human population is basically a flat line. Then, agriculture hits, and that line shoots almost straight up. It's a simple equation. More food equals more people. The scale of that growth was just something the world had never seen before. So, where did people set up shop? As they settled down, they naturally built these villages in the smartest places they could find, right along river valleys. I mean, it makes total sense, right? Rivers gave them fertile soil for their crops, a constant supply of water, and made irrigation a whole lot easier. These farming villages were a huge leap forward, for sure, but they were really just the beginning. The next stage of this whole transformation was the birth of something even bigger, even more complex. The very first civilizations. All right, let's jump forward in time a bit, about 5,000 years, to around 3000 BC. Some of those really successful farming villages had grown so big and so organized that they turned into something totally new, the world's first true cities, the first complex civilizations. But that brings up a really important question, right? What's the difference? What turns a big village into a civilization? Like, what are the key ingredients you need for that to happen? Well, it turns out historians have pretty much nailed this down. They've identified 5 key characteristics that separate a simple village from a truly complex civilization. So let's break them down, one by one. First up, advanced cities. And we're not just talking about big villages here. These were bustling centers of trade and culture for the whole area around them. We're talking about huge populations for that time period. Like the city of Uruk in Sumer, for example, had somewhere around 50,000 people living in it. Can you imagine? Okay, number 2, specialized workers. Remember that food surplus we talked about? Well, because of that, not everybody had to be a farmer anymore. This freed people up to get really good at other stuff. They could become artisans, priests, soldiers, government officials. You get a whole society of different jobs and experts. Characteristic number 3, complex institutions. Think about it. How do you keep a city of 50,000 people from just turning into total chaos? You need rules. You need organization. And that's where things like government and organized religion come in. They create the laws, they provide the leadership, and they keep order in a big, complicated society. Number 4, and this one's a big one, you need a way to keep records. How are you going to track taxes or manage all the grain you've stored up or write down the laws for thousands of people? You can't just keep it all in your head. So you invent writing. The Sumerians, for instance, came up with a system called cuneiform, and it was absolutely essential for running their civilization. And finally, number 5, advanced technology. Civilizations are basically big problem-solving machines. They create new tools to deal with new challenges. We're talking about game-changing inventions like the wheel, the plow, and learning how to make bronze for stronger tools and weapons. This stuff didn't just make life easier, it gave these societies a huge military and economic edge. And there you have it, the 5 big pillars of a civilization: advanced cities, specialized workers, complex institutions, record-keeping, and new technology. But here's the most important part. None of these things are possible without the one that came before it, and they all rest on the foundation of that one single world-changing idea: farming. Farming is the engine that drove this entire journey. Which brings us to a final thought to chew on. We've just laid out what made a place like Sumer a civilization 5,000 years ago. So now, take those same 5 characteristics and apply them to where you live today. Does it fit the definition? It's a cool question because it connects our modern world all the way back to its very, very beginnings.